What's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Tomatolito Show. And I got another edition for you as far as organizations and promotions that we've been looking at. This is another addition to that series that I managed to put together. And this one's one of the classics, one that's been around for quite a while. And this is SHOOTO MMA. SHOOTO has been around since 1985. 1985 is when they established SHOOTO out in Japan. It was a famous popular wrestler, Satoru Sayama, who they link as the original Tiger Mask. So he ends up establishing and forming SHOOTO in 1985. By 1986, they started holding events, and that's when they first came out into the scene, publicly holding amateur events. His premise, his idea behind SHOOTO was based around shoot wrestling, and that's where the origin of the word comes from, and the name of the organization. His premise was to basically create a sport that revolved around realistic and a new realistic and effective fighting system. So at that time, he launches it. 86, they start having amateur fights. They compared SHOOTO at first to the other pro wrestling organizations that Japan had at the time, which was the New Japan Pro Wrestling Organization and the Universal Wrestling Federation in Japan. So for him to be able to separate himself, he aimed at having no predetermined results. And that was the first thing that he did to separate himself from professional wrestling as it's accustomed to, where they have predetermined winners and losers and somewhat of a scripted process. He ended up changing that. So he's like, SHOOTO's not going to have any predetermined results for any of our fights. 1986 to 1989, they end up having about 3 years there of competition and their amateur fights. By 1989, they end up going and holding their first professional fights. Their setup is in a traditional ring, somewhat like what we saw Pride and so their setup is fairly similar to that, right? They took the professional wrestling, but they ended up changing with a new premise and a lot of promise behind SHOOTO, right? Started getting a lot of notoriety because of that, because there was no predetermined results. Initially, between 1989, once they started sanctioning professional fights, between 89 and 94, the professional fights were basically changing in form. The format was changing stylistically. Prior to 1994, which is when they hosted the event, the Vale Tudo Japan tournament in the summer of 94, prior to that tournament, SHOOTO didn't feature any punches to the face while in a ground position. So it started changing, right? Around 93 is when we saw UFC first come into existence. SHOOTO ends up changing that format around 94 because of the popularity and the effectiveness that we used to see in other organizations that were starting to take shape around that time. So SHOOTO up to 94, they didn't allow any punches to the face while in a ground position. In 1996, they ended up organizing themselves. So they created World SHOOTO, the SHOOTO Association, and International SHOOTO Commission. They all three were formed in 96, and this ended up marking the end of SHOOTO as a single organization. It turned it into a combat sport and with actual governing bodies. So now there was an oversight for what was going on with SHOOTO. SHOOTO was brought to America in the late 80s. As we started seeing the amateur competitions take form and then leading towards the professional to close out the 80s and 89. Around that time, SHOOTO was brought to America. As of 2006, SHOOTO has promoted numerous events throughout the U.S. and Canada, mostly Midwest and Eastern states in the United States, and then Canada has hosted numerous events as well. SHOOTO South America, also known as SHOOTO Brazil, is managed by none other than Andre Pederneiras. He's the first event that was hosted out there was hosted in Rio, and that was in 2002. So they're spreading all over the world. They have them here in North America. You have them in South America now. SHOOTO Brazil, huge organization out there, and of course their effect that they have in Japan. By 2016, they end up signing an agreement with UFC and for the UFC to begin airing their events and broadcasting their events through UFC Fight Pass. And in 2019, another big accomplishment by Shooto, they end up partnering with One Championship. And this last year, they end up partnering with One Championship. And the signing of this partnership means that One Championship would be welcoming the Shooto fighters to compete in their organization and within their organization to obviously grow the effect of the fighters and the competition within the MMA fighters in Japan. So a lot of big things that Shooto has been doing. They've been around since 85. They consider that they had their 30th year anniversary last year because in 1989 is when they first hit the scene professionally. But they've been around for 35 years now. So they've done big things in the world. Check them out. Keep an eye out for their next event. And for you Shooto fans out there, I didn't forget about you guys. Of course, there's plenty of other episodes and plenty of other organizations that I'll be covering here. This one is dedicated to you. Check out their website, check out their next event, and hope you enjoy. And if you're already a fan of them, you already know that they've been putting quality product out there for decades now. So thank you guys again for tuning into the Tomatolito Show. Hope we did justice for all you Shooto MMA fans. And stay tuned. I got a few more organizations that I'm checking out in the upcoming episodes. Take care of yourselves. We'll talk soon.